So I have a voicemail from apparently India, you told me.
No, it's from the IRS.
It's from the IRS.
Yeah.
I was legit scared. I mean, it's tax time. You get a voicemail with someone saying that you're committing tax fraud, you know? You get nervous, and then you laughed at me.
Do you have a guilty conscience at all?
I pay an accountant to have a guilty conscience.
Yeah, there you go.
The problem is that there's spillover effects. I'm not insulated.
I think that if you were to call that phone number back, that random Connecticut phone number, if you were to call
them back. So you knew
it
was from Connecticut?
No, you had told me.
Yeah, okay.
You were like, the IRS Connecticut branches.
Yeah. In retrospect, it's a little naive sounding.
There would be someone that was clearly not living in the U.S. or I don't know how to say that correctly.
A foreigner?
Yes, a foreigner that would tell you to go to Target or Walmart and buy iTunes gift cards and transfer to them to pay off your IRS debt.
I mean, if I get a discount on my tax burden, it might be worth it.
You'd be like, oh, I like the IRS now. They use Apple products.
Exactly. I've been working on Mirage and Addon Docs stuff. It's pretty cool.
Nice. Oh, yeah. You got the Mirage site is now an Addon Docs site.
Yes. So I just, over the weekend, I pulled the trigger on it. And I was tired of, I had been working on it for a while, but there was no clear cut over period for me. And I was just I wanted to do it in a way that wasn't going to take the site down. But then I was like, it's not a huge deal if it goes down for a little bit, as long as I have enough time to make it working again.
You mean like while you were migrating for 30 minutes or 2 hours or whatever it was?
Exactly. Just because I had never done that before. So, but yeah, it's pretty fun. I have the Addon Docs site up now. I had it in a branch. I had been working on it, but the current site is a GitHub Pages branch. So, so stepping back, Mirage has master branch, but it also has, man, my voice sounds so low. It's because I've been sick.
Sound fine.
I was singing Barry Manilow earlier. What'd you think of that?
I think it was a Little John.
Oh yeah, it was Little John. In my head, I wanted to sing Barry Manilow.
It's don't worry, common problem. It's really easy to get those two confused.
But then I just started singing "Get Low" by Little John. It really is low though, low. So the GitHub Pages branch in your repository is like a Jekyll app, and GitHub Pages knows how to build Jekyll apps. So you can just start a new repository and just push a static index.html to GitHub Pages, and you'll have a GitHub Pages site. So you can put a static build of anything on GitHub Pages, and it'll just work.
I see. But if you included a Jekyll app, it would then do all the Jekyll compilation steps?
So you could create a new Jekyll app, which is a Ruby static site generator from 5-10 years ago, which is not cool anymore because Gatsby's cool now. But it would be as if you took the source of that, and instead of having to do Jekyll build and then upload it, you just upload the source, and then GitHub knows how to
they can detect that it's cool.
Yeah, so that's pretty awesome, which is nice for just saving yourself that build step. But then you have 2 code bases to manage, and in reality, it's kind of annoying because you have this Ember app that you're using to test and for your dummy add-on, and we've talked about this before. And then someone wants to update your docs, and they have to edit a Jekyll app. And most of the time, if it's a quick edit, they can just edit the markdown file, so it's fine. But yeah, it's just annoying. Every time I would work on that, you pull it down for some reason. I run bundle install, and the Jekyll app doesn't work. And even though there's a lock file, and it's because some Ruby version is not so supported anymore. Anyways, I work on this once every year and a half. So
yeah, frustrating.
Yeah,
for sure.
I'm already keeping Mirage up to date. The dummy app already works. I know that. So that's the beautiful thing about Addon Docs is it's already there. So the idea with Addon Docs is everything's in master, and then as part of a deploy step, you do a build of your docs site, and then you just overwrite that GitHub Pages branch, and you force push it up to your repository, and then you're just serving that built version from GitHub. And Addon Docs does some logic so that you can have multiple versions. So if you think about it, kind of the way I broke it down was okay, first I want to get the GitHub Pages branch to be static, static assets, not a special unicorn anymore where it's a Jekyll app with a gem file, because it's just static. It's going to be all managed by us now. Mm-hmm. So first do a static build of the Jekyll app, put that in GitHub Pages, force push it. Boom, you've lost the source code forever. It's gone. And it's gone. So I like saved a backup on my local computer, but that was the first step. So at this point, you have like just a dist with like all this, and it's funny, right? Because yeah, it's just like you never think about this, but the static build of a Jekyll app is like 1,000 index.html pages and like all these directories. It's like that's like how the internet started. So if you want to change something in the nav bar, you have to change like 1,000 files. Yeah. You have to like start grepping your way through this thing. So no one's going to touch that thing. It's just like a dist. But that got the site working again. And then the next step is like get the Addon Docs infrastructure in place and move all that stuff into the versions folder. And the versions folder is what Addon Docs uses to leave old builds of your old version site untouched.
I have a question here. So did you have to build a Jekyll app for like every single version of Mirage and then put it in the correct Addon Docs folder?
So the way I did it was I had already had versioned docs in my Jekyll app, but it was all the same app. So I just copied like the docs. So when I went from like 3x to 4x, I created a new like folder in the Jekyll source called 4x and started by copying 3x. So a single build of the Jekyll app actually has all versions. So the only thing I had to do was take the things that used to be in like docs/docs/3x and then take that part of the app and move it into versions 3x in the GitHub Pages, new GitHub Pages file structure. So I was actually able to do this while leaving the root app the same. So the root app was the build, but then I just started copying these things and putting them in /version/3x. So if you went to ember.mirage.com, you got the same site, but if you went to /version/vo.3.x, in the old site, that's not a URL. It didn't point to anything. It would be a 404. Now it loads the same 3x branch, like the 3x, a copy of the 3x docs.
The 3x HTML.
Exactly. Except like now it's 2 steps lower. And so the references were wrong. Like if you think about like the asset references and stuff. So I was like, should I like rerun Jekyll build with the right base URL? I just did a find and replace and changed everything. It was super easy. So I actually just made copies of all that stuff. And that was basically it. So that was like, in terms of like zero downtime deploy, there was a time when like ember.js.com was the original thing. And there was also a copy of each version at /versions. So then the next step was going to be to get the Addon Docs site at the root. And that's what I did next. So I did like a static build of that. And then I think I just pushed it and I think it just worked. And so like once I pushed it, I merged my like new site PR, which had been open for a long time, but was ready to go. And I did Ember deploy production and Addon Docs did its thing, left all the old versions untouched, but then replaced what was in the root. And it worked. And I could still go to like /version/vo3x and see the old stuff. And there was like one problem. You have to like add the versions to the versions.json so the version selector works, but that's pretty cool because now like in the new site I can select old versions and it just shows me the old site. It's pretty awesome.
Super cool.
And there was something that didn't work for a little bit. I'm trying to think what it was. The CSS, the assets, I had to fix the paths.
I have a question. Were there URLs on the old site that are no longer working?
That's what it was, the redirects. So all the URLs in the old site, so like the sidebar, you would click installation and it would be a pointer to /docs/vo2x/installation, which now was not a thing anymore. So what I did was set up, first this is all the stuff that it was the redirect stuff. So you want to preserve all the old URLs. And fortunately for me, the old URLs had /docs/version tag in them. So I could set up those rules. And so basically like the current site /docs is like part of the Addon Docs guides. But if you go to /docs/vo2x, I'd want to forward you to /versions vo2x. So then I set up that redirect in the root. And first I did it on a static way. That's fine. Once I got the Ember app running, I did it with like window location or something like that.
Now, GitHub Pages, it's just a static, like HTML static site server. So there's no like Nginx config where you can say like match this URL.
But there's a hack that you use to get single page apps working, which is the 404 page hack, which is if you hit a URL that doesn't have anything to serve, it will 404, and you can use that root 404 page to redirect to the root with a query param and load your SPA and have the router update and do its thing. So that's a hack.
So the 404 page basically acts as like a unknown URL router.
Exactly.
Cool.
So I added some logic there. It's pretty hacky, but it's like if it's /doc/30x, if that matches, then go to /version/30x/rest, and it worked.
Is there any problem that programmers can't solve?
Yeah, I mean, it's like I have some JavaScript in there with like vars, because
Nice.
it's like it's weird. And then I think I might have moved the redirect logic into the Ember app at some point. I can't remember. I think I did, but then I updated the old URLs. Anyways, it was all pretty routine.
So everything works. So if someone had a like just random Mirage page bookmarked, in like their onboarding documentation,
Exactly.
they click that link, it still works. That's awesome. That's super impressive.
Yeah, it'll forward it to /versions, but it'll work for sure.
Nice.
Yep. So
Very
yeah,
nice.
pretty cool. And now there's a new site there.
Yeah, I looked at this. Did the old Mirage site have API docs?
No, so the old Mirage site had handwritten API docs. So like there was a collections markdown file in the Jekyll app, which was often fell behind the actual API from the code base and had missing methods that weren't documented.
I see. Because that's one thing I noticed that immediately caught my eye, I think, was that collection page. And because that collection in Mirage is something that I use all the time. Like I'm writing custom route handler and I have some collection that I'm dealing with. And I pulled up that page. I was like, oh, wow, there's functions here that I had no idea existed. This is so cool.
Yeah, first or create or whatever, things like that. Yeah.
Stuff like that, where I always just use like, was it like where and all and find?
Yep.
But yeah, there was other stuff. And yeah, it was just super cool seeing it in Addon Docs, seeing the API reference. I was like, oh, awesome. More stuff I can abuse.
Cool. Yeah, it's great. I mean, it's so nice to have it there. And like, so I did all this. This was like on Saturday, I think. I pushed the new version. I didn't tweet about it. I didn't talk about it in Discord. And within like an hour, I was like, I had finished and I had stepped away from it. I looked at my email and someone had submitted a PR with, the dummy app has like a title tag in like HTML, like title for the tab. And it still said dummy since it was the dummy app.
Defaults, yeah. And
the person was just like, yeah, now that Mirage, now that the dummy app is the docs site, and then he had like exclamation point in parentheses because he was excited about it. We should make the name Mirage. And I was like, this is so cool. Like, it's an Ember app. This guy knows Ember. Like, it's super. He just goes right to the index file and change it.
Yeah, I mean, if it was a Jekyll app and you put the title of dummy, I don't think it would have been. I mean, we can't prove this, but I don't think it would have been fixed that quickly.
Right.
So
exactly.
That's super cool.
And just the fact that it's just in master, it's just awesome.
Yep. Do you have any plans to do like demos now that your doc site is an Ember app? Do you have plans to do like demos and make Ember components to kind of show off?
You betcha I do. Yeah, I have a ton of ideas. I want to go through and do every single type of modeling relationship and have an isolated Mirage server that you can show, similar to what we have on Storefront, but make it even cooler. So I'm stoked about that. It's gonna be awesome.
Hey, you know how we were talking about like having an interface for like running Mirage in different environments, like in Node and wherever?
Mm-hmm.
Do you think that like forcing yourself to have like an isolated Mirage instance in these different components will like help you flesh out that?
Oh, 100%. I was thinking about this. We've talked about like README driven design before. So I was thinking about this actually because after doing all of this, I started working on Ember animation site. Ember Animated. Ember Animated has an Addon Docs site. It was a little out of date, and there were some things that were confusing me about it. I was trying to learn the library. So one of the things I did in Addon Docs was add the ability to specify a brand color, and that affects like the hero background on the homepage, the link color, and all this stuff. Ed had chosen this really nice pink for Liquid Fire, and he had Ember Animated as an Addon Docs site, but it had that same orange as the default orange. So I kind of updated Addon Docs, made sure it all worked, and set that as the brand color. So as I was doing that, I was reading the docs, trying to understand sprites and transitions and motions and all this stuff. And I was thinking like they have some demos there that are stressing some pretty complex cases, but it's really missing like a quick start. And you really want to tell that story of how it works. And you have an Ember app there, so you want to you can just start using the stuff. And, it's really interesting because when I've done a lot of this, kind of writing documentations in this style, and you want to make a great demo, but you want to show only the important pieces of what you're showing. So, for example, let's say you do a demo, but you don't want to be distracted by a bunch of Tailwind classes. You just want to see the Ember animated code. So, but you want to do it in a way that's not, you're actually looking at the real code that's powering the demo. So that actually forces you to come up with the right abstraction so that you can progressively introduce it, but it's using in a real situation. And so I actually think that's exactly right what you said, which is basic. It's kind of a long-winded way of saying I experienced this not only when working on the Mirage stuff, but also on the Ember animated, is that I want to be able to tell what's the simplest story I need to tell in the quick start to get you to start learning this. And that should actually drive my API design in the same way that it should for Mirage. Mirage, here I am wanting to show you this mock server thing. What's the simplest way I can new up a server with minimal configuration and make it super clear for you to understand?
Yeah, talk about outside in.
Yeah, exactly.
It's super powerful.
Super powerful. So 100%. So absolutely, as a result of this, there's going to be a more flexible way to use Mirage introduced. Because right now you install Mirage and you run your Ember app and you just, it's just a opaque initializer that just boots up Mirage and it's a singleton. And now I want Mirage instances, maybe here and here. So I'm going to have to think about how do we do that given there's like given Pretender is a singleton, and how can I have maybe 2 servers running at a time and all that kind of stuff. So it'll be interesting to tackle that stuff. But absolutely, you should be able to do that. And you can think of all sorts of ways this would help end users. So we were just talking with a company who was using Mirage to demo their component style guide for their app. Some of their components are data loading components. And so they just use Mirage right there to show how that would work. And so now you can think, if it would be that easy to just, my component has a dependency on like a server. So now I can just use the mock server here and it's all right there. You don't have to, it's very easy to use that.
I'm writing a style guide and then I just have a clear box that I can draw around it. Here's a server component. Here's the Ember component. Here's a template.
Yeah. Pretty cool.
Super powerful.
So that'd be pretty awesome. I think it shouldn't be too bad. It'll be interesting thinking about it through the Pretender stuff. I really haven't thought about this that much yet, but yes, I definitely want to show all of that stuff in directly in the docs. The timing stuff. That's the other cool thing, like in the animated docs, there's tons of animated examples, and there's a global thing that comes from another add-on he has called like Ember Animated Debug or something. And it has that thing from his EmberConf demo where you can slow down bullet time. It's pretty cool.
Nice.
Yeah, Ember Animated has a ton of awesome stuff. The docs are not quite there yet. I know I suffer from this too, but we've definitely talked about this before where it's like there's so much in there and there's so much that people aren't using because it feels completely locked away, but it's all there. It's just like, how do you convince people that it's worth working on, telling the story in a simple way, and also like making sure there's a lot of polish. We've talked about this before, like how can we help bring more polish to the ecosystem and these projects, because that has such a big impact. You want like a study or something that says like, if you were to spend an extra 10% of your time, instead of writing that next method, polish up this demo and you're going to have such a bigger impact.
Yeah. I think, as a coder, it's very easy to write more code.
Yeah.
It's very hard to write docs.
Yeah.
Come up with like nice stories and compelling examples. It's just hard. I think tools like Addon Docs nudge you towards that.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, you were talking about the quick start, and it would be cool. Like, could Addon Docs ship with something that's like, hey, we set up a quick start file, and it just like has headers. Like, how do you install this? What's the very first? Does it have generators? What's the very first thing you could write?
I've thought about that actually, because how can it help basically the tool do even more of that stuff? And I saw a lot of people with Addon Docs sites, and the homepage was like, it gets you far, but then the actual homepage is just, there's not much there. And so you have to do your own stuff, but there could be something there that just gets you started. So there could be more we do there for sure.
Yeah.
for sure.
Back to like you bring up like the polish and convincing people to do that. It's hard. It's like, do you want your library to have more features or more users? I think you really have to be conscious of the how are people going to use this?
Yeah.
You just have to be like thinking about that at all times. And that's something like we suffer from.
We definitely
And
suffer from.
I feel like we like are always asking that question, and stuff still slips by.
Totally slips by.
So if we weren't asking that question, I
Yeah.
can't imagine just our stuff. We'd break APIs. Our stuff would just morph all over the place.
I had this thought related because I was looking at EmberMap and we had just done the upgrade and I was just cleaning up some stuff in there. And there's so much about the design right now that's like, that bothers me, that could be better. And, there's sometimes where it's like, we're trying to work on consulting projects or we're trying to work on, Mirage or something else. And a lot of times we're making videos for EmberMap, and that's like the most important thing we've decided to do, right? And so it's like you're going to spend time on EmberMap. You want to make another video for your subscribers as opposed to like polishing things up. But that polish is definitely important. And so let me try to step back and say what I had this thought where it's like, I think the answer to this is that the thing you're working on needs to be worth being polished, or else you shouldn't be working on it. So I think the reason polish gets set aside is because people work on too many things. So Adam talks about this with his stuff. He basically says, I never work on anything unless I'm going to take it all the way. Like I'm only going to put things out that are really good end to end, full triangle, like we talk about, right? So there's times where we have things that are like, there's bugs open in storefront, or there's a docs page here that doesn't make sense. And I think that's a symptom of being stretched too thin and not focusing. So the question is like, if the EmberMap homepage or the sales page is not where we want it to be, then what is that competing with? And if it's something we want to work on, then yeah, we shouldn't. It's kind of like the bug-free stuff that we talked about. Mm-hmm. It's something that you should go all in on. Otherwise, you shouldn't take it on. And I think like, yeah, you can argue there's people who are helped by a library that's like half finished, but like got some functions out there. But could the impact be better if you had scoped down and worked on something end to end? And like usually our answer is like yes.
Net impact of all your projects.
Exactly.
Yes.
That's what you want to maximize or whatever. That's your maximization utility function.
Okay, so let's say like we over rotate and we add too much functionality to a library, kind of realize 6 months later, like, oh, this problem is insanely hard. How do you correct that without? So one answer,
because that's going to happen. Right. The point is not to say that that's never going to happen. The point is to have a process that respects that.
Because one answer here is just delete everything.
Yes.
But that feels wrong.
Right.
So what?
I think you want to communicate it first of all. So what happened? An example of this is Addon Docs. Sorry, the weather went from like 40 degrees to like 0 degrees, and everyone in New York City got sick. Everyone, like in the last week.
Wait, what temperatures did you do?
It was like 40 degrees. And then it became like 0 degrees or like 5 degrees.
6 degrees.
Yeah, it was like 6 degrees over the weekend. Yeah. And it just happened instantly. So I don't think the human body can take that. And then I talked to people in Canada. I'm like, what the heck? What are you guys doing up there? That's not what humans are meant to do. What did the humans do who moved there first? They were just like sitting around. It was like beautiful in the summer. They're like by lakes. And then it starts getting colder. And like, that's kind of weird. And then winter comes and they're like, holy smokes, we're freezing our butts off. And then they make it through like 7 months of like negative 10 degree weather. And they're like, yeah, I think we'll stay here. And they just set up camp.
Really short-term memory.
I mean, seriously, like you're in Minnesota or in Canada. You just went through 6 months of this grueling winter and you're like, yeah, I think I'll stake my claim here for future, many of my family's generations to come. Like what's going on with these? It's like, oh, by the way, Uncle Fred went down to Florida and he's loving it. I just don't understand. I love New York, but it would be nice to be on the West Coast in sunny California sometimes. I have that thought, especially around this time of year. So an example of where this happened in Addon Docs is people started using Addon Docs after we announced it for private add-ons and their own add-ons. And we had done a bunch of stuff to optimize the use case for open source add-ons, we install like deploy things. We assume you're deploying it to GitHub pages and it's going to be open source. Now you can remove that stuff and hack around it. That's fine. We hadn't really considered a case where you want to document a component that brings some styling along, or like a lot of styling, or even like global styling, which is a valid use case for an open source add-on. So if you wanted to use Addon Docs to document Ember Bootstrap, you're going to have problems right now because Ember Addon Docs, Ember CLI Addon Docs has styling of its own. And there's like just not a good answer to that right now. Set that aside for now. The main thing was like documenting private things like for your app. And there's like a lot of things about it that make that use case hard. That's not really a use case that we wanted to start with, and it expands the problem space significantly. So what we did in this case was like, we actually just clarified that this is for open source add-ons. We changed like the description and like put it in the docs and stuff and just talked about it. And so there's a ton of people using Addon Docs for internal add-ons and internal component libraries. That's awesome. But my kind of line right now is like, it's going to be painful, and I'm not sure if or when anyone's going to get to that use case. So if I was in that situation where I wanted to document an internal style guide right now, I would not use Addon Docs. I would copy some of the demo code, because that's one of the big ones, that the demo component. I would just copy that and make it myself. That's what I've done for some
That's
people we worked for.
I think
and for EmberMap.
EmberMap's code base had that for a while. It might still, I don't know, but
Yeah, exactly. So it's just a different problem. So I think that's one thing. Just being aware of the fact that, as opposed to when I started Mirage and people start asking for features, I'm like, yeah, add it in. Now you have to be aware of this, right? That it affects the scope of the project. So I think that's one thing. I think that's probably the most important thing. You'd rather just give someone the bad news and tell them up front that, what you're asking for is not supported, and I don't have an estimate right now. So what else can you do? I think sometimes it does mean you don't just delete the repository, but I do think there's an option for like scaling back. We've done this with EmberMap before. We've built features and realized that we underestimated the scope or hadn't thought through some states. Like we were going to have like single topic purchases, and we just decided not to do that because we didn't have the resources for it.
Another thing we've done is we have come out with a high level API, realize it's way too complicated. There's more use cases than what we had thought of. And we'll split that thing up into multiple low level APIs. And yeah, it's a little more clunky, but hey, you can compose those low level things to accomplish any high level thing. You have to deal with like the API pain.
Exactly. I think that's another aspect of this, which is like a sign of maturity, being able to admit that you can't foresee all the ways it's being used. And so if you have an idea for a high level API that you want to end up with, sometimes you need to reel that back. And it's going to feel disappointing to not be able to do that thing that you wanted to. But it's also, again, I think it's a sign of maturity and just being a little bit humble and saying, this is what we want. Does this decompose into? What are the smaller pieces? What if we were to ship the smaller pieces and let people use it for a little bit and get feedback on it before we commit to the high level stuff? So that's kind of, I think, for example, like Tailwind, like Ember CLI Tailwind. I was like, you have to install Tailwind. This has to be the high level story. Ember new my Ember app, Ember install Ember CLI Tailwind, Ember serve, and you've got Tailwind wired up. Now, it turns out that means that Ember CLI Tailwind has to know how to include the Tailwind file into your app. And given that we live in a world of apps and add-ons and nested add-ons, that's a little bit harder than it sounds. So you can build up to that, but maybe as a first step, it would have been better to provide like one function that gets added as a part of the default blueprint to your like build file, Ember CLI build file, but that you can delete and is just a low level escape hatch if you're like, I'm in add-on land and I want it included over here instead of over here, or I want it vendored instead of to end up in app CSS or something like that. So I think there's usually different ways you can go. Fast boot and fast boot app server, same thing. Like maybe it's nice to have a fast boot app server, but maybe you just start with like fastboot.visit and let people figure that stuff out, because by taking on the high level thing, you're taking on a bigger problem space for sure. So,
in hindsight, the fast boot stuff in hindsight, I feel like is super obvious. but only in hindsight.
Right.
I think before all this happened, you would say like, yeah, there should be a fast boot app server. There should be an easy way to run production fast boot apps.
But I think if you've had this experience and you've fallen down into this trap a few times, then you would be asking different questions and you would be able to anticipate it.
Yeah.
So just like with the storefront stuff, we know we want to end up with like a data loading component, but we're not there yet. We're just not. And if we tried to do that, it would be a mistake.
Yeah. I mean, yes. We've already changed the APIs like 4 times.
Yeah.
Yes.
So and like we've seen this. Glimmer is a rationalization of Ember. Ember Animated is a rationalization of the primitives of Liquid Fire, so it's not as like easy to use, but the building blocks are there. So that's bringing this back. Like it's good, but you still want to. Yeah, there's
the communication here.
Yes, exactly.
I feel like that's a big missing piece, because it's not that you're admitting failure.
Right.
It's that you're just steering the ship a little, and end users are going to be super happy to use something that. It might be lower level, but at least it's like where your current thinking is.
Exactly. I mean, what you just said applies to Tailwind. Adam was talking about having a tool like Purge CSS built in. We haven't used Purge CSS yet with our Tailwind projects because it just haven't, and it's not been a huge priority. I want to get Purge CSS wired into Ember CLI Tailwind because it basically should be like a prerequisite, because it's basically the idea of how it's supposed to be used. But if he had waited until it was ready, all the people who are using it and getting value out of Tailwind now wouldn't be.
So I got some news for you, buddy. We actually do use Purge CSS. It's going to blow your mind. But this is a great example. In Fastboot, we take all the CSS and we inline it, and then we strip out the CSS that isn't used on that page. If we had left all the CSS there, we'd be shipping tons.
Yeah.
So we strip it out. And
but the Ember app does. Ember app just pulls the whole thing.
This is just Fastboot. But I had looked at, how do I do this? I tried a few different things. I found Purge CSS. I tried that. It worked. And then it was kind of clunky with Tailwind. And on Adam's website, he has an example of how to use Purge CSS with Tailwind. And it's not like this magical function. Right. It's super low level. It's like, oh, make a new Tailwind. Tailwind has a thing. It's like, not Tailwind. Purge CSS has a thing. They call it extractors or something like that. He's like, just make a new Tailwind extractor and give this as a code, and it'll just work. It was awesome. It was like a super low level escape hatch.
Yeah. No, that's good. It's good. It's good to think in that way instead of like, how can we do this for everyone?
Yeah. And
which is tempting because you've been on the good side of that and know how pleasant it is. But sometimes you are boxed in by that. And we've talked about this.
Especially with Ember, that you want to be a good community member, buy into that Ember mentality.
Right.
Yeah.
Yep. So anyways, that was pretty cool. You can check out ember.mirage.com to see the Addon Docs site. It has a theme. It's like this cool blue that like matches the logo. I have like a new logo I want to incorporate into the homepage. And Liquid Fire has like the purple theme, and Miguel just messaged me, and he has like an add-on called Ember Yeti table that uses Addon Docs, and he saw the theme update and used that. So it's pretty cool to see it being used in the wild. Like once I had the infrastructure stuff dealt with, and I was just working on the Addon Docs site, it felt pretty powerful. Like it felt like this is super solid. Like it still has lots of bugs. Like you can just see what the open bugs are. But as far as like a shared ecosystem tool goes, it's pretty sweet. Like the deploy stuff that Dan worked on is awesome. To just not have to think about it, because I've done this for several open source libraries now, written documentation sites, had to make all these decisions about the styling and everything. It's pretty sweet.
Yeah, I mean, so I've used Addon Docs and I've never used anything else. And the reason I've never used anything else is because it's like I don't want to deal with that stuff.
Yep.
I do a GitHub README and I move on. And Addon Docs is super pleasant.
Yeah,
super
cool.
pleasant. So yeah.
Got to fix, like, there's some glaring things now, but now it's good. I actually have a motivating use case. Like now that Mirage is a site, it's like my project, and I want it to be people to be successful with it. I want search to work. Search sucks right now, but I'll fix an Addon Docs, which will fix it for everyone. So I'm excited about that stuff, and just being a real user of it too.
Nice.
I mean, we were before, but in a more pressing way. So, we have to figure out we don't have to talk about this, but the blog, and there's some use cases that are interesting that right now things are such that every version of your app is its own unique thing. because of dependencies. And originally we had thought about having like top level app and then like it can pull in the versions of the docs, but that gets tricky because of dependencies. So you don't want to worry about, you're working on your 3.6 add-on and you want to make sure it still works with like your 2.4 version of your docs and the Ember versions and all that stuff. It's unpractical. So you need some sort of sandbox, some sort of container to isolate things. But then you do have some cross-cutting concerns like a blog. So we're going to have to figure that out. But I think we can come up with something good.
Nice.
So yeah, Addon Docs has been fun. Mirage now has like maybe one bug left, and then like figuring out the faker and pretender stuff about how to pull that in best. And then we're ready for 1.0. So then I can ask the community like what should be the next most important thing to work on. So I'm excited about getting back to like new feature development in Mirage.
Nice. Very nice.
Yeah.
I used a new add-on called Ember Bind Helper, and it's awesome.
It doesn't sound awesome. It sounds like
it's super low level.
Most low level thing that doesn't affect me at all.
It is the way it works. So what it allows you to do is awesome, and then the implementation is awesome. I love everything about it.
Okay.
I think like the GitHub README has like a like code. What is the thing that like grades your code for maintainability?
Code climate?
Yeah, something like that. It has like a D.
Okay.
But that's just because it's an Ember app. That doesn't matter. This thing is awesome. So you know when you use the action helper, you do like action, some action. That is going to create a new function for you with the this of that new function is going to be the location where you called action.
Mm-hmm.
So that way, if you call action in like a template, and
then
you
pass that in,
pass that around, the this helper, the this context is going to be where you originally created that action.
So the creator of the action is pointing to some action called like update counter, and it's called like this dot increment property count.
Yeah.
And you do action update counter, and you pass that in a component. And
you keep
3 levels
that
down,
yep.
And then that person clicks a button. It's still going to update the state on the root component.
Exactly, because the action helper is the thing that closes over the actual function and sets the this. This creates, so this is great when you're just dealing with like things in the action hash or you're passing actions around. But imagine you have like an action on a component, a function on a component, or you have a function on a service and you want to pass that thing around. So if you do like action my service function.
Let's do like, think of an example, like
you have the counter, you have a global counter on a service.
Or like current user dot, what's the service function that a user would have?
Maybe log out.
Okay.
Right, because you could make this argument, you can log out from anywhere.
Yep.
Maybe you could put that in a renderless component, provider component, but let's just say it's on a service.
Yeah.
So you want to pass around, you want to take that thing that's on a service, wrap it in an action function, and then pass it down to other components.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe there's like a modal component or like a confirmation component, and you just want to pass an action to it. And when you click OK, it fires that action.
Mm-hmm.
Now, because this thing lives on a service, if you do like action current user service dot log out, this context of that function is not going to be current user service. It's going to be the template where you invoked that parentheses action helper.
I see. So if let's say that log out within the service used this, so it said like this dot get user dot log out or something like that.
Yep.
But now when you do action current user dot log out, it's going to invoke this dot get user, but this is going to point to the component where you rendered that action helper. And it's going to say, I don't have a user property, and it's going to undefined as not a function.
Yeah, exactly.
Or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So then like sort of like the quick answer here is like, oh, put an action, put like an actual function on your component, have the component inject that service, and then have the component just get the service and call the actual function on it.
Mm-hmm.
And this works well. Like this is what I do 90% of the time. But I was in a situation where I was building these components and I just wanted to pass in functions from services and pass in functions from other components.
Like you could refer to like current user dot log out in a template, and that was it. You didn't want to have to go to like the component and create an actions hash and inject and everything.
It's like a control. It's like a flow. Like it gets me out of the zone when I have to do this. So there's a thing called the Ember Bind Helper, and it gives you
allows
a
you
bind.
to set the context.
Yes. So it gives you a bind that works just like the action helper. So you would do bind instead of like action myService.logout, you would do bind myService.logout. And what it does is it sets the this context to that parent object.
Oh,
so
cool.
The this context.
And you don't have to like pass in the service again as a second argument.
No. So
it's basically like, so in JavaScript, if you ever had current user and you just did current user.logout, open paren, close paren, this is automatically sent by the object that holds the method. That's just how JavaScript works. And so this basically replicates that.
Yes.
It's as if you were to say onClick equals current user.logout, : :
Yes.
So it's just like an immediate invocation of it. That's wrong term to use, but it's an invocation of it with, again, this pointing to the owning object.
Yeah, so it works just like in JavaScript. The context is like the parent object. I think that's the best way I can describe it.
Mm-hmm.
And it's pretty amazing. You don't. That's just it. That's
so
all
you just
the
do
template code
curly bind space current user dot logout,
and that is going to
close
give
curly.
you that is going to give you an action that's going to call current user service dot logout, and then this context is going to be the current user service.
Okay, so how does it do that?
This is like the mind blowing part. So bind is a helper that gives you a function back that gives you an action, but there's also a what do you call it? There's like an AST transformation. Build time transform. So the real API of the bind helper is really bind like myService.myAction space myService. Yeah.
Because it needs to. Yeah.
It's actually target equals myService, because if you did myService, that would be like you'd be partially applying the first parameter of the function.
Okay.
So yes, but yeah. Exactly. You do need that extra.
You need a reference to the object.
You pointed that out earlier.
Yeah.
You were like, what?
How is this doing it? Yeah.
Right. So it does this build time transform that actually adds that to your code. But you as a developer, when you're writing the template, you don't have to worry about that. And
that's awesome.
That's one thing I love about this. It's one thing I love about this add-on. It's like, yeah, it's super nice, and the solution is super creative.
Very creative.
Yeah. Now I will say, if I'll probably only ever use this like a handful of times.
Right.
But there are situations where it's great.
That's really cool. So that's Ember Bind Helper. And of course, it's named after the JavaScript function bind.
Yes.
Which is a method on every JavaScript function that you can call and set this context to, or apply query arguments to it.
Yep.
So that's what it's named after. That's really cool.
Yeah. Lifesaver.
I love the helper versions of JavaScript functions. I find them really nice to use. Things like the map and take and all this kind of stuff in the template. It's really cool because it's like declarative, and it's just neat.
Yeah. Composable helpers is a default install in every app.
Yeah.
So
cool. That's awesome.
Yeah.
What else you got in the list?
All right,
let's take a look. What was I going to say? I think, I could see that being first class. Like I could see there being a first class API in Ember for invoking a method on a service. It's sugar over injecting and basically doing what you just said.
Yeah, I actually like. Yeah, because I guess with this you would still need to inject to get my service into the template.
Exactly. So I could see. It's like global. It's like service action. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
service action. Yeah.
My use case,
action.
I'm using on this podcast, I'm using an example of a service action, but I had functions on a component that I was passing down into child components, and I didn't want to basically rebind them.
Yeah.
And there's like a lot of like polymorphism going on here. So it wasn't always clear what the names of those things were. So being able to just use bind helper to recreate this
that's cool.
Yeah.
But service action would be interesting for something like a logout button that only ever calls one method on your singleton session service. To me, that's like a perfect example of like a nice high level API.
Yeah, because what do we do now? We have like a logout component, and the component injects a service.
Yeah.
And
just fine. I mean, it's good that you can build it with that.
I wonder though if there's something here where it's kind of like route action, where people see service action and then they just
go crazy with it.
Just all actions.
It's too easy to do that. It's like too easy. Yeah.
This is like a thing that I'm really excited about this.
Yeah.
But I don't want to use it all the time.
Sure.
It's actually really rare that I want to use this. It's just awesome that it exists when I need it.
Yep.
So,
yep. Cool.
We can do, I had like acceptance tests.
That can be our last topic.
Yeah. You want to do that?
Sure.
Okay. So, I don't know how to start this off. Like, I think a lot of times we start with acceptance tests. Like we just start, if I'm TDDing a feature, I'm usually starting with an acceptance test. Why? I kind of have this question, like why? Why are we starting with acceptance tests? I kind of know the answer, but yeah, this isn't really my...
Because everything you're writing is an implementation detail of a feature, and you shouldn't test implementation details until you need to.
Is it implementation detail like of the actual like user interacting with the page?
Yeah.
Yeah, and then, okay, and you shouldn't test,
It's
right,
like,
until they become like a public API.
exactly.
Right.
That's how I would boil it down. So once you make a component reusable, it's going to be used by other developers in other areas. So you want to test the public interface, which is like what happens when I pass in errors equals array of this. But like as far as your components go for the feature you're building, it's all about your user, and you're using them in one place for the purpose of the feature, you know?
I would say like even if we're not, so I guess before I continue here, I want to be clear that like I'm talking strictly as an application developer,
Yeah.
and not an add-on developer
Yeah.
now, because I think that might change things a little. But even if I'm writing a button component, it's a first, I know this thing is going to be reusable, but it's the first time I'm writing that button component, and it's on a page where you click the button, it submits a form. I'm not starting with an integration test. I'm starting with an acceptance test.
Yeah.
And it's like, even though I know this is reusable. And in fact, I'll probably even the second time, the third time I use that button, I probably will continue to use acceptance tests.
Yeah, the only thing I would say is if it helps you at some point to start writing integration tests, so you have an isolated environment for that button, then you could use that.
The point where I usually start writing the integration, the rendering tests, whatever we're going to call them, is when I'm like recommending to a colleague, hey, you should use a button. And then at that point, I usually will drop down and write a few examples in a rendering test, in an isolated component test to show off how to use it.
Right.
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
What sparked this conversation? What made you think of this?
So a few things. I've been like kind of lukewarm about TDD in UI apps. I think the feedback loop is like way too slow, and it's bad when you have to rename stuff. And so I've been trying to do more TDD. And so I found that like, hey, if I just jot out an acceptance test, what should be happening, regardless of what components are used or how they're wired up, because that wire, when I don't know exactly what it's going to look like, that wiring is going to change. And because of the test runner is slow and the feedback loop is slow, it's like TDD is just painful.
Yeah.
But it's not painful with the acceptance test approach. I actually enjoy it. I'm like, oh shit, like I actually like TDDing now.
Like putting pause tests in your test, or are you saying like literally writing every single line of the test and having a failing test?
Yeah. Like red, green refactor, writing one test, having it fail. Now it's super, super high level. And even things like the test IDs get renamed, and that's painful again, because of like the speed and the slowness.
Right. But yeah, going into it, you can say at the highest level, you can say, I should be able to click a button, put my password in, click submit, and I should see. Yeah. Yeah,
exactly. It doesn't matter how, like, what. So that actually was example of the thing that made me think about this is entering a password. And it doesn't matter like how that password gets transferred to the server, how any of this stuff happens. It's just, I want to capture that. And then later on, I'll figure out like how all that wiring comes up.
Right.
But if I try to test a component, like an actual like login form component, that thing's going to change
so much.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Another reason this came up is someone had taken our email course and emailed us and basically said like,
that's right. It was the smart components email.
Yeah. And our smart components basically says like, put actions that do mutations inside of your domain components, because that's like the best logical place to put them.
Right.
There's a few other reasons, but we'll just leave it at that.
Right.
And the person said, yeah, but this is hard to test.
Right.
It's hard to, it's just hard to test one function that's buried inside of a Smart component
that interacts with maybe the Ember data store or other services.
Yeah. And like my sort of gut answer is like, yeah, it is hard to test, but you're making a Smart component. It's how you start off. It's an implementation detail of the page.
Of the feature. Yeah.
And therefore, I guess that means if like that's my answer, that's our answer, it kind of means we don't write a lot of unit tests.
Right.
And we don't.
And you've said this before, like for a framework like Ember, a lot of the things are unit tested already. So a lot of your job as an application developer is to wire them together to support a business feature of your app. And so that's why you're writing tests against the business features of your app.
Sure. With unit tests, let's take a harder example of like component integration or rendering tests, whatever we're calling them.
Right.
Those, you can still write meaningful tests that test behavior with those, and you're not just like retesting.
Yeah, you're testing business logic.
Yeah. But still, we don't do that a lot.
Yeah, we don't. But there's times where you have a form and like maybe you do, so you can do that. I mean, you can wire up Mirage, you can wire up the Ember data store, the services that are needed without needing like a particular UI part of your, route hierarchy rendered. Mm-hmm. And you can go to town on that. But it is harder, and it's also a second step.
Yeah. I guess the reason I want to talk about, I'm more interested in like the fact that like we can do this, we have done it, but 80% of the time we don't do it.
Right. I just think it just comes down to, if you were writing an object in OOP, you would start by testing the public methods of that class. And you would intentionally do that because the private methods are going to change a lot.
Yep.
So, and that's good practice.
So why not do that? So, okay, why not do that with a component? Why not say I'm writing a component, components are objects, I'm going to test the public.
But the analogy is that the component is actually a private method for your application.
Yes, exactly. Exactly. The component is a implementation detail of the UI.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes, and you're testing the UI.
Exactly. Until it becomes a public method. If the component becomes public and other people are using, now you're using it, of course, but if it becomes used in many places, then it becomes public, and you should write tests to cover that public behavior.
Yeah. Are other folks writing a lot of acceptance tests and then very few component tests, and then basically 0 unit tests? Not 0, 5 or 6 unit tests. Yeah. Which is what our code bases look like.
Right.
I would want to know, like,
I think based on what I've heard, the kind of steelman argument for the other side, or the perspective of the others, the charitable interpretation of a defense here would be, acceptance tests are awesome because they give us a lot of guarantees that the behavior is not changing, and because they test kind of end to end the whole system. But the reality is they're complex and they are slow. They get slow over time, and they also cover up a lot of the details such that you can do something like create data or visit a route and have no idea what's happening there. So you as a developer are just kind of clueless what happens, what went wrong if a test fails, because they don't have a lot of information, purposefully, deliberately so. And so you can move a lot faster if you write lower level tests. The lower level tests also have a good, another charitable argument here would be like, if you do that, then the reality is like your button component is not just a little implementation detail. It's like a thing that's going to live in your code base for a long time. So you want it well designed. And if you're not doing lower level testing, you're not going to get the feedback from the tests that the tests provide, and which will influence your design for the better. So you could say, like, if you were to test drive some of these components, like outside in approach being like, start with a feature acceptance test. Now I need a button. So now you go down to the integration test or even the unit test, and you're like, okay, here's how the button's going to be used in this template. Even it's only going to be used once, I'm going to integration test it, and here's how it's going to be used in that one case, and I'm going to like make it easy to test, so it's going to influence the design. That would be like, I think, an alternate perspective. But from my opinion,
sure, I get that, and that's like an awesome approach from like a TDD standpoint. That sounds amazing,
right?
but we don't do that. Like,
yeah, we don't do it because there's a cost associated with it, because the details of those components do change a lot, just like private methods do, and you would rather have that flexibility and be guaranteed of the external behavior. So from my perspective, that's why we make that trade-off all the time, because people who are trying to unit test the model hooks on their routes end up with all sorts of issues. Those tests are there's a lot of boilerplate to set them up, and they actually don't stress the business use case of your test, of your application. So I don't think they're super valuable. Yeah. Now, we do unit test methods or objects if they're complex and we're writing them ourselves, but we've never really written a unit test for a single function, let's say a model hook on a route before. Because the reason you're running that model hook is to display something in the template, and I want to see that, right? Whereas like with the button, you have a smart button that shows a loading spinner with an async task, and it's like the reason you're writing that button is for this route and this route and this route and this route. And oh, we've just learned, now that we've used it in 10 places, it behaves in this weird way when it goes from state 1 to state 4. So now I want to go to my integration test and represent those states more easily so that I can understand them and wrap my mind around them.
Yes.
So that's that. I think that's the answer. That's our answer, anyways.
I mean, obviously, I agree with you.
Yeah.
Obviously, I want to know if
it's good. That's why I pay you.
Yeah.
To agree with me. Yes. I don't pay you, by the way.
I'm a yes man. Yeah. I want to hear what other folks.
Yeah. I think. Yeah, it can get big and slow, I guess, but I think you can solve those in different ways. I'd still rather have the high level guarantees.
Yeah, I mean, we pay like $10 a month to split our Ember test suite across 16 different nodes.
Yeah,
and it was super easy to set up. So
I know, but no. Again, to be charitable, like we have a super simple app, and like I
work on another app that takes 20 minutes to run the test suite, and I think there's something like 2,000 acceptance tests, and we actually had to write an NPM script to basically wrap Ember exam to speed this stuff up. And yes, it is.
So yeah, there's some downsides. Yeah. No doubt about it. The question is like, where would you rather be, I guess? And it would absolutely be interesting to bring someone on who has an opposite perspective, or at least a different take on it, and hear what their experience was and what happened after they switched and all that stuff. That'd be a great conversation.
For me,
we'll bring weapons, you know?
For me, a big factor here is speed. I cannot...
Speed of what?
Just speed of development, feedback loop speed.
Yeah.
When I alt-tab to QUnit and I get a message that says, cannot find module 9FB13, that's just like a huge... That just stops me.
You're going to have to explain yourself. First of all, when you say speed, that makes me think you're talking about you would prefer lower level tests, but that's not what you're saying. You're saying...
I grand scheme of like feedback from when I make a change to how do I get feedback that my change was...
in the use case that you care about.
And then if I have to go move a bunch of tests around or change a bunch of filters in my testing URL, and it just... that stuff just stops me.
You're just saying, so if you were constantly moving between kind of levels of abstraction in your tests as you were building a feature, it would be more difficult. A lot of times a feature can be done in one sitting, and or in kind of one, even if not in one sitting, it's one conceptual level, because you don't have to go down and do all these crazy levels. Again, I've said this before. When I built the ORM for Mirage, I was like, there was parts of Mirage where you're high level, but that stuff you're like, you go down really quick and you spend months down.
Yep.
So you need that.
Yep. Again, I'm not arguing.
You are arguing.
I'm not arguing against component tests, because I do find them useful.
Yeah.
But I don't find them useful when I start TDDing a feature. And I think that's there's something about that I think. Well,
that's interesting. That is interesting. So maybe, I mean, you could potentially, let's say you had like a style guide and like a component style guide here for your app, and you need a panel or a card, and you don't have that yet, but you know the 3 ways you're going to represent it. So maybe you write the rendering test for that thing first, get that into your style guide, and you know that those are all the use cases that need to be supported by your feature. Now, when you go to the feature, you're like doing it in a separate PR. This thing already exists there.
If that were the case, that would be awesome. But the thing is, I don't know. I
Yeah,
have like
there's-
a very
yeah.
high level view of the feature I'm building, which is usually like a sketch mockup
Right.
or like a whiteboard mockup.
Right.
And then I'm like, okay, I think I need this component to do
Right.
this, but it turns out that actually I need that component to like do split into two components and do data down actions up between each other. And in that case where it's like when I'm trying to TDD that, it's like now I'm moving test files around. I'm
Yeah.
freaking changing these custom URLs. It's just like the feedback loop is so slow. Whereas when I have a single, like I can fill in a password, click login, and see that I'm logged in acceptance test, then I feel great about just moving stuff around, making changes, seeing that.
I mean, that's always how I've done it. I mean, honestly, I've never gone through this situation where I'm like, I'm going to force myself. I have tried, again, I've done TDD on Mirage for sure, but I've never been in Ember app and forced myself. What would it feel like to just grip my teeth and do this thing? Because if you took away that flexibility for me that's why I use pods. One of the reasons, because again, to me, this is all implementation detail. I'm just trying to get the feature to work. I totally want to be able to move things around, paint with the brush stroke, and then come in and fill in tests at the end or while I'm doing it to help guide me. For sure. That's always how I've done it.
I've been liking the TDD stuff if it's at that
right level,
highest
Yeah,
level.
yeah.
No, not even.
Oh,
it
I
is
see
at
what
the
you're saying.
highest level. As
Right.
soon as you try to, and again, button might not be a good component because we all know, in some sense or the other, we all know the interface of button.
Yeah.
Right. And so, but like, what happens if it's like login form?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
That might be split into multiple. It might be like, is there a provider that's tied to it? And like, all that stuff just means that all those changes, if you're writing a component test, you're now, every time you make one of those changes, you're changing your component test.
Yeah.
And that's just, that makes a feedback loop super
I see what you're
slow.
saying. So you're saying you've gone past the point where you've already written tests for a thing and you go back up to the high level of acceptance test and you realize you need to change something. And so you have a bunch of tests that you just wrote that now need to change.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
Screw that.
So I've been doing the acceptance, like TDDing through acceptance tests.
Yeah.
I like it.
Because those are not going to change because that's the
Yes,
thing that's the subject of the PR.
Now the things like the test IDs will change.
Right.
And you kind of have to scratch your head and figure that stuff out.
Right.
But generally, like the name of the test is not going to change. The
Right.
module of the test, you can just,
Right.
I should be able to submit this. I should be able to log into my account.
Right.
Boom. That thing is never changing.
Right.
So.
Right. I see. Interesting. Maybe someone will send us an angry tweet.
I feel like
I'd welcome it.
the way I talk to other people about testing, I feel like we're in the minority here.
I don't know. Dan EmberMap just tweeted basically exactly what we're talking about. He tweeted that this week. He's like, I've never understood. He's like, there's a bunch of discussion about this. He was like, TDD with UI development feels wrong, or it feels like I've never really been able to get in the flow. UI development feels too not up as a well-defined kind of contract that you're verifying. And so trying to put assertions to it the way you would with like an API, for example, or an objects interface feels hard. And so I need to like play around before I do it. We have a podcast episode we call like test before commit or whatever.
Yeah.
But
that podcast has been changing some of my views about this because I've been thinking like maybe you actually can TDD UI
as
development.
long as you keep it high level enough.
Yeah. I really like the thing that is like everything below like clicks and fill-ins are just implementation details. So you're not TDDing a component.
Yeah.
Doesn't make sense. You TDD the UI. I really like
I guess but would someone just argue then you're not actually TDDing because like you're so high level that maybe.
Yeah. But then I might.
But who cares? I mean,
my thing would be like that sucks, and it might just be the tooling. Like this could be a total tooling issue.
Right.
But yeah,
we can say this for another time, but I'm also not sure where I stand on this question of like people talk about testing, improving the interface, the design of your interfaces, and that like the test suite that you have as a result is like a side effect. It's not even like a benefit. It's like the fact that you have a test suite that covers the behavior at the end of it is like, how do people talk about it? They say it's a
it's like I know what you're saying.
It's like a secondary or third.
It's a
benefit.
side effect of you using the test to drive API design.
You could just throw away the test when you're done because the real benefit is that the design is like, what?
Well, that's just not true.
That's ridiculous.
No one is gonna. If you have a
And I have
public interface,
Yeah, exactly. I have
you
thrown
would
away
not
tests
throw that
before
away.
for sure.
private interface
Yeah,
tests,
or
yes.
just lower level things.
Yes.
That even if they were public, but I was like, this is not going to stay probably. So,
But if you had the public interface
Yes.
tested, you wouldn't say like, "Wow, this public API is amazing. I can throw away all
Yeah.
the tests." Like,
yeah, exactly. Yeah. So, anyways, but we can talk more about that next time. All right. So, are you feeling good now? You're going to be able to continue your work as a craftsperson, an artisan. You're going to write handcrafted, artisanal, homebred tests
the acceptance
with
test,
organic test IDs.
the acceptance test TDD stuff is pretty good. I'll leave it at that. It actually is. You should try it. It is
Okay.
pretty good.
I'll try it.
One test, get the test passing. Another test.
I'll watch you do it. I mean, how many tests are you talking here? How many do you start with? How many would you write out?
One test.
Okay, but that's not like when we TDD in Rails, we would write out like 6 and say like,
Yeah,
hey,
but
yeah.
you're not. But this is why
it's not
You're
actually
supposed-
your TDD.
you're supposed to do one test.
Oh,
Like-
really?
Like I should be able to log into my account and then like whatever to get you to log in, that thing that checks your password. Since you only have one test, that thing's just going to return true.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah,
like,
no,
I
I know.
I shouldn't be able to log in. Then you go on to the next thing. I shouldn't be able to log
So
into
I
my
see the
account.
failure is supposed to drive the other test cases.
Yeah. Well, no. So it's like I can log into my account and you have a thing that's like, is
Return
valid
true.
password.
Yeah.
It just returns true because you're only running one test. Then I should not be able to log in my account without a valid password. So that forces you to write the failing test. And then the idea here is you only ever have to change your code.
The smallest amount to get the test passing, so you have confidence.
And you're
Yeah.
not. And
But you're still
not-
thinking of the test cases in your mind. So you
Yes.
can still.
Well, yes. And everyone just like opens up a notepad or a test file that writes comments,
Yeah.
or they write skips. That's
Yeah.
like, oh, I need to test this. I need
Yeah.
to test this. I need to test this. So
It's how your mind, and it's fine. There's
Yeah.
nothing wrong with that. There's no reason to sacrifice the pragmatism on the altar of TDD. I mean, why would you even? What's the point of that?
well, because
Are
you're getting, I don't know, like just maybe you're getting too
worried
far
that people are
ahead.
going to think you're not cool?
No, maybe you're like, you're getting too far ahead. You're thinking about too much.
I mean, certainly
Yeah, I could see a
that can
situation.
happen.
I could see a situation where you just start like
Trying to
writing
cover-
out all
yeah.
these use cases and thinking about use case C while you're writing use case A.
Just stop it. Just don't do that. That's what I would say if I was like a senior developer at a company. So just like stop doing that. That's dumb. Don't do that.
I still use, I've been using QUnit to do a lot. So QUnit to do is like you can write a test, and if the test fails, QUnit won't show an error because it's a to do, and it's expecting you to just basically say like, I haven't written this test yet.
That's cool.
Yeah. And then if the test starts passing, the test fails
Right.
because it's basically the inverse of test. And I think I think there's some other stuff like you can set it up so it fails in CI, so you can't push to dos to CI
Mhm.
stuff. But I've been using that as like a placeholder, and
Yeah.
yeah. Again, I think there is something here with this TDD stuff, but I think it is, I think you have to be at the super high level.
To me, what's more important is what is a better process to get us to think, us being UI developers, to get us to actually consider the states that we aren't considering when the first time when we write this stuff. So you talk about TDD until you're blue in the face, but if it doesn't help me ship a less buggy app, the biggest bugs that we see in UI is because, especially the stateful UIs we build, is because you hadn't thought, you coded that episodes route and you hadn't thought what happens if 3 of those episodes are on the homepage in a bookshelf. You click on podcast and now you got 3 of them coded, but you need to load the whole set. So what happens? Because you built that whole thing thinking about /podcast. So that's what I want a process or a tool to help me with, whether it's like automatically going through my app in a certain way or something.
So I guess this is a good thing. Like TDD, you up front, you have to know all those states.
Yeah.
And so it's not going to point out those states to you. TDD is going to say, if you don't have a test for that, well, your code probably doesn't cover it because you never wrote a test for it.
Right.
So
that's interesting. All right. Well, are you almost done with this feature? I don't know if this TDD thing is really really paying its dues here.
That's a whole nother rant.
All right, we can stay late today. We'll buy you pizza.
No, we are not. No.
Yeah, you can stay until 10.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're gonna stay and finish the feature.
So I'll finish the feature, and you'll give me pizza. Wow. Why don't you just give up like all our programmers pizza every night?
You'll get your paycheck this month too. I'm around to one with a bank password.
Yeah, I logged into the bank account today. I know how to get in there.
Don't look at the bank account after December. It's depressing. And with that, we will see you next week. Thanks a lot for joining us.
Bye. Rate us on iTunes. Bye.